Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Chandrashekar LSP, who is an evangelist with Zoho in Canada. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mario, for having me.
Well, I was interested in a survey that Zoho did recently just on Canadian businesses and growth. And what I find surprising, 72.5% of Canadian businesses had year-over-year growth of in 2021, and 82.6% of those are optimistic for continued growth in 2022. Those numbers, what do you think, LSP? Did they surprise you? Or?
Well, to be honest, they didn't surprise me in terms of how businesses have adapted in the last 12 months. It was more of trying to, understand the perception of what businesses are dealing with. First off, Mario, I also want to qualify the survey a little bit more. One of the things, that we did specifically in the survey was to kind of go after businesses that have 100 or more employees. So in the technical sense, they're not micro businesses or really small businesses. These are businesses of a certain size. I would qualify them as mid-market or medium-sized businesses, because on the two ends of the spectrum, the small business, we know SMBs and in Canada make up 95% of the businesses, but within that, the mid-market would probably roughly be between 3.5 and 5%. And that is one sector that we don't know much about, because we always get news about the small businesses on one side, and the large enterprises, they make their own noise and they have their own representation. But this particular segment has always been of interest, and we wanted to understand what has been the impact in the last 12 months or 18, 20 months on business and what the sentiment is. So to me, the fact that like everyone has adapted, it was no surprise that even these businesses or businesses of this size have managed to stay positive, and they are growing actually.
Yeah, and let's talk more specifically about different markets in Canada. Toronto led the way with year-over-year growth, and optimism as well. But we're seeing Montreal and Calgary specifically lagging in terms of their growth. Toronto was at 77.6%, businesses saying they grew in 2021. Montreal 66.7, Calgary 59.3. What's happening in those markets?
I think just given the number of businesses, I think there are two things that we want to understand. First off, if you actually look at the number of respondents across different regions, the numbers in GTA would have been higher, and from those of Montreal and Calgary would have been a lot fewer. Is first assessment purely in terms of the number of engagements that we've had. Now, when I looked at this number, the next question that crept at me was, okay, we need to understand why you see such differences within this region, because at this level, we wanted to understand the sentiment, overall sentiment, but then the subsequent survey that I'm thinking of is trying to understand at a detailed level at each of these market levels, what's going on. So that's how I basically leave it at this point. The number of companies, the number of businesses that responded in each region would basically skew the number predominantly in favor of GTA, because obviously you have more number of businesses or more number of respondents in this survey from that area, so to speak.
Okay, super. One of the interesting things I found from the survey was, the digitization of businesses. 66.3% in the survey said that they were at an intermediate or advanced level of full digitization. I guess that number has probably grown, right? And probably accelerated in the past 2 years?
Absolutely, 100%. Again, you've heard this before, and this particular survey is basically validating that perception that there's a whole lot of digital transformation that the last 20 months have ushered in than what 15 years of what analysts and research firms could not do. Really, that's been the situation, right? Because all of us were forced to work in a completely disjointed scenario, and then yet work is basically team sport. So you really had to work, you really needed the technology. So that has ushered that particular phase in. And I see that one of the reasons why there is also going back to your previous question on optimism and growth is because there was technology available. There was technology that was available that was even affordable for businesses of all sizes, and they have been able to respond and keep the status quo, or at least get to a point where they're being positive. Again, 88% of Canadian businesses being positive is definitely a very hearty sign.
Yeah.
And even there, here, 60%, 66% are in advanced and intermediate stages, which means that they have gotten in and they're all in. And it's basically giving them the whole idea that business can grow, and they're also finding ways to adapt through this situation.
So I don't know if there was a correlation drawn in the survey, but maybe anecdotally you can speak on this. I would assume that, going back to the first question about the business growth, much of that business growth for those who experience that were probably the ones that embraced the digitization, correct?
I would have no doubt in saying yes to that question, Mario. Again, probably more tighter questions that can possibly connect the dots, but clearly, given the percentage, I was thinking that, maybe over 50% was where I was thinking that the numbers would be, but then 72% of businesses or 78% of businesses being positive or growing is definitely an indication that they had something that they could run their business. Just imagine, the absence of technology. I think everybody would have been completely stumbling or not knowing where to go with this whole thing.
So do you think, as we move forward, that this whole area of embracing the digital becomes even more important for business owners?
100%. Again, if you actually look at the fact that they have been forced to do this all of a sudden, I think 66% of businesses being in advanced and intermediate stages of digitization is a very, very fascinating number in itself, right? Because when you look at the whole process of digitization, there are kind of layers. A lot of these businesses would have been digital, at the start of 2020, they would still have been digital, but then they would possibly have been running on-premise software. Nothing much would have been on cloud workloads and so on. But now, that particular conversation has also changed. People need to be working from wherever they are, and they need to have access to systems. So that's where the cloud migration was kind of accelerated during the last 20 months. And now what you see is they have much more modern technologies that they're able to work and collaborate within the organization, at the same time have those automation within those processes in each of the departments.
Yeah, and I guess when we talk about digitization, I think a lot of people, think about e-commerce, whatever, right? But I think there's two aspects of it, right? It's the digitization that is geared towards people that work in the company, right? And how they do the work and how they do it better and more efficiently. Then, of course, it's the digitization that hits the consumer and the customer, right?
Absolutely,
yeah.
The retail aspect of it, well, that has been phenomenal, right? Just look at the growth of a company like Amazon in the last 20 months has just surpassed everything that it has seen in its entire history, so to speak. Clearly, everybody needs to have a digital front or a digital storefront, as people would call it. And what has happened again is all along technologies have existed, but then nobody was forced, because the whole idea is, why fix what's not broken? That was the mindset when you looked at digitization from an e-commerce perspective prior to 2020. I have a storefront, I have whatever little online presence that I have, I'm fine. But now you really had to take your business completely online, because the people walking in through the doors completely stopped. It was that particular channel of business was completely eliminated. And then you literally had to, figure out how do you go, digital, and at the same time have your, billing applications, your bookkeeping applications, and your inventory applications, everything working together to create that same effect of how you would run a brick and store storefront. the technologies existed, just that the businesses have now been forced to embrace it, and now they see the benefit. You can have these systems, whether it's a brick and mortar storefront or a digital storefront, you can still have the same system that can manage the whole, the whole business for you. So that realization and the fact that they can continue business the way they did traditionally, and also modernizing the way they're doing their business, is giving them the ability to understand these technologies and adopt them more into their businesses.
Yeah, super. Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mario, for having me. Have a good one.
That was Chandrashekar LSP, who is an evangelist with Zoho. This has been Taking Care of Business with Mario Toneguzzi. Thanks for joining us today.